Yeah, hello, everyone. I am grateful actually right now to introduce Hedi Razavi, the managing partner of the German entrepreneurship based here in Palo Alto, just around the corner. Hedi helped us out literally within the last 12 hours notice, and I greatly appreciate what she got ready for overnight, literally. And she is the moderator for this session, and we are grateful for that. It just so happened that Hedi and I have actually been co-organizing the same series, The Remarkable Woman in AI, since early February of this year. So this is actually counting to the series number 4. So with that, Hedi, I am in your gratitude, and please take it over from here. Appreciate you helping out.
Thank you, Thomas. It's a pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to moderate a discussion among this truly remarkable group of women in AI. At German Entrepreneurship, we empower entrepreneurs and innovators to cross borders and expand their businesses internationally. And I lead our Global AI Competence Center that has the mission to enable the adoption, expansion, and internationalization of AI technologies and solutions around the world. As a former female founder of a Silicon Valley AI startup, I believe that the gender diversity topic needs to be an integral part of the AI discourse, especially in a year that McKinsey calls the breakout year of AI. And our goal, along with Thomas and Transatlantic AI Exchange with the Remarkable Women in AI initiative, has been to inspire all genders to take steps towards addressing the gender gap in AI. And to set some stage here, I'd like to share some alarming statistics that Dr. Caroline Simmert from Stanford had kindly shared as part of her preparation for this panel. And she shares that what we know is that currently AI and Web3 tend to exclude half the population. Women hold 22% of AI jobs globally. Germany has a large gender gap, with 16% of the estimated AI talent pool being women. Across Europe, about only 19% of overall information technology degrees go to women. And here in North America, women earn 18% of CS PhDs in AI only. So these numbers have not really moved. Similarly, according to BCG, only 13% of startups include a woman on their founding team, and fewer than 3% have an all-female founding team as well. So in her research, Caroline and her team see consistently that women are less likely to be hired and promoted in technical fields, even when controlling for performance. And this is especially true for women of color. With all that said, today we want to change the narrative and center the thought leadership of prominent women in AI and issue a call to action. The relevance and the future of the field is at stake as one that will be known as inclusive or not, representing the broad interests and voices of society or not. And today we have 5 experts joining us who are sharing their thoughts about this topic as it relates to the industry as a whole, but also their careers and work environments. So my first question to each of you on the panel is to please tell us who you are and what you work on, but also a very interesting problem technology area and question that you think about and you're working on right now. And I'll go through and I will introduce each person to stage. So let me start with Terra. Terwilliger is the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Strategic Projects, Office of the COO at Google DeepMind. So please, Terra, the stage is yours.
I'd say the title is a little intimidating. I certainly know many remarkable women in AI. It's a little daunting to think of myself on a panel titled that. Historically, I have worked in diversity, equity, and inclusion. at Google DeepMind. And recently have added to my remit the working on special strategic projects for our COO, Lila Ibrahim. What that means is that I'm increasingly bringing that lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion to complex cross-functional initiatives where we need to be thinking about equity, because equity is so foundational to the artificial intelligence field. We have an opportunity to get it right or to get it really wrong. So something I've been working on recently, which is much in the news, is this question of AI governance and how do we bring the lens of equity to how we're going to govern this important and powerful technology.
Thank you so much, Terra, for sharing that. And there's, of course, there's a lot to be said about AI governance, and it's a topic that is of global interest, especially in our work in Europe and Asia. That is the topic that draws a lot of attention. So would be great to hear more. Next up, I'd like to invite Stephanie Ifayemi, Head of Policy at Partnership on AI. Thank you for joining us today, Stephanie. Please, the stage is yours.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be here today. I'm Steph Ifayemi. I'm the Head of Policy at Partnership on AI. And I thank you to the organizers for having me. I think similar to Terra, it's sometimes, you know, the title is very much daunting, and I know so many fantastic women in this space, so it's genuinely an honor to be here. I think a key question I've always been thinking about in my career is building responsible sort of technologies, right? And what does that mean in the AI space, particularly now when we're sort of building large-scale AI models? I think a question I've always sort of come back to is how do we design, develop, and deploy technologies in a way that sort of protects people and society? And so I think a few sub-questions that come up for me when I'm sort of answering that question about what design and development should look like is, what are the sort of values that we think should be sort of embedded in the technologies that we design and develop? And Terra, I think you mentioned equity and inclusion as the sort of key things that sort of guide your work. And I think that that is similar for me. I think second is who gets to have a say when it comes to what that actually looks like when we sort of talk about promoting equity and inclusion, who has a seat at the table and is able to participate in those discussions. And last, how do we come back to traditional processes, right? I think we understand that a lot of the processes that we've used to design, develop, deploy technologies in the past, some very strong, but some might need updating. And so what does that look like? How do we take the values and take these potentially new people at the table and also use that to redefine the ways that we sort of put policies in place as well? I started my career in government. So I started at the UK government, where I led the UK's work on AI technical standards. I've worked across many different technologies, so AI, but also quantum, the internet. And a lot of my work has been, how do we sort of get the benchmarks, the definitions, the standards that promote safety, security, et cetera, in these technologies? And I think that a lot of my work traditionally has been looking at the way we've done that for you know, everything from your fridge to your cooker, everything has standards in it. But there hasn't been the sort of same socio-technical questions that AI brings about related to sort of fairness, to bias. And I think, therefore, we need to return again to that question of, if the technology is bringing about sort of new questions, how do we redefine the processes and who's at the table to sort of think about answering the standards question? So my work in the UK government, a lot of it was really about how do I get new people involved. I developed and deployed something called the AI Standards Hub in the UK, which was announced in the UK's AI strategy last year, which is really intended to get new people, civil society folks, and educate folks on how to sort of engage in the standards process. And then lastly, I think this is something that I very much continue to do in my career at Partnership on AI. We're a nonprofit that is made up of 100 partners across many countries, I think 14 countries at the moment. We bring together industry, civil society, and academia to sort of think about tools and processes that can help AI be responsible. And I do have much more to share later on, but I will stop there. Thanks again, Heidi.
Thank you, Stephanie. This is wonderful. And you're absolutely right in that AI is really breaking a lot of the traditional ways that we think about inclusion and development of new products. So you highlight an area that is rich rich as a topic, and there's a lot of value in talking about those. Next, I'd like to invite Eman Barhoumeh, AI Product Management Director, formerly at Meta. Welcome as well. So the stage is yours.
Thank you for having me here, and definitely humbled by the women that I see here and the women that I know in the industry. So I come from a humble place. I was born in Jordan to a mother who was a teacher and a father who was a painter. And I got an opportunity to come here and study computer science and start my career in product management. And throughout my career, I helped companies go online when the age of the internet was coming on. I also helped companies engage with customers when the age of mobile came about. And then I helped companies operate online when the cloud became so prevalent. Now, with all of this, with the companies operating online, data became so important. And I noticed something that was really, really different about how we were building products, which all of a sudden it's predictive algorithms and predictive modeling was becoming interesting way to build products. So I got a chance through my career to apply that to fintech, where we were basically trying to build more affordable packages for insurance for customers that matches what they need at affordable prices. I also got the opportunity to apply predictive algorithms to the area of safety. Stephanie talked about safety. Safety is a very near and dear area for me. And when you look at it in the transportation industry, and all of a sudden you can see rides across the platform happening, you notice that rides, for example, that end up in a good outcome versus rides that end up in violence and sexual assault have different patterns. And you can say that sexual assault and violence is something that happened in our world, but you can take a different approach through technology and say, no, these patterns we can see, and maybe we can use predictive algorithms to actually outline that there's an incident that might happen and intervene and prevent a sexual assault from happening. That got me hooked on AI. I really understood the power of AI. And since then, I've decided to dedicate my career as a product manager in AI. And right now, I'm applying generative models and LLMs to figure out how to take knowledge of the world so we can better solve the problems such as safety and others. I also was the founder of the Product Management Center in the University in Washington, here in Seattle, where I live. And it's aiming to basically find people and improve product management as a way to help take underrepresented minorities, bring them into product management as a way to contribute to the world and bring different voices.
I love that you have been focused on applications of AI with social impact, and thank you for sharing about your background and where you got your start from. And it sounds like that has been impacting how you think about the application of this technology and what it can do in the world. So thank you so much for that. Jasmin, it's great to have you back. So let me invite you on stage. So Jasmin Dave is the Senior Director of Global Corporate Events at NVIDIA. Welcome back, and would love to hear your perspective on this question, and please tell us what are some of the interesting areas of technology or problems that you have been thinking about and working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been at NVIDIA for about 15 years. I've seen technology change, AI, recent times. I guess as part of my world, you get to see it at firsthand. You're the people on the ground that are able to see it at firsthand with inclusion and diversity and what's going on there. And so our concept at NVIDIA has always been that it's everybody's job to make sure that that we have a good, diverse, and inclusive conferences and events. And I think it starts there, to be honest. I know we have a lot of research and a lot of things that we're all doing, but if we're not sharing with one another, if we're not including one another, if we're not inclusive of different races and genders, then it doesn't get solved. So my job is to make sure that at my events and conferences, we do have a diverse, inclusive group. We are talking about personalization and captioning for those diverse groups that are not able to hear the different accents or have disabilities. So we are the eyes on the ground, as I say it at NVIDIA, and being able to kind of jot down the issues where we see it from the ground up.
Excellent. So it sounds like you think about this topic that I get to think about in the context of, sessions like this, but you get to breathe this topic and think about this topic on a daily basis. And that's amazing. I'm sure there are a lot of great experiences you can you can share with us moving forward. So thank you all for those introductory remarks. I'm gonna now switch a little bit and ask a different question of each member of the panel. So a question for Eman. The field of AI and Web3 are growing rapidly, as you know. And what do you think are key opportunities in this space that our attendees here should know about?
Oh my gosh, there's so much opportunity in AI. So we're building human intelligence, right, into artificial intelligence, right? So artificial intelligence really is fueled by our knowledge. And our knowledge has been documented over the years by the internet where we shared it, or the books that we have written. And we've taken the internet and we've taken all these books and we fed them into these algorithms and trained our knowledge. And then the outcome comes this large language models. Now, these large language models, what are they really, really good at? What they're really good at is understanding patterns, best practices of all our knowledge. They are able to articulate those patterns in a way that we can prompt and ask those questions about nuances of these knowledge pieces and get an answer through generative text. Now, the opportunities that I see is, how do you apply knowledge of the world? And be more specific, how do you take these patterns that exist in the world to help you better solve problems? Because I'm a big problem solver. One of the things that we would do is it would accelerate your development cycle. If you're a developer, you heard earlier about the millions of dollars, up to $50 million is what I heard GPT took to actually be trained on this data. You can leverage these LLM models that are pre-trained and tailor them to your specific domain and use cases by fine-tuning them through practices like future learning, so that they're more applicable to your use case scenario on your industry and your vertical. We heard earlier that there's all of the industries are seeking more AI talent. And the reason for that is because they want to apply AI to the vertical world. So the big companies have solving for the horizontal AI problems, right? But they are not going to go specifically into architecture or into manufacturing or into supply chain management. And these are the opportunities that come to us that enable us to take some of the knowledge of those patterns that exist out there, fine-tune them to these industries, and come up with solutions. Let me give you an example. Like, if I'm a developer and I'm using a foundational model, it used to take 10 developers 6 months just simply to take a sentiment analysis of our products. So let's say all our products, we want to know if the customers have a positive or a negative experience, right? It used to take 10 developers 6 months. Now it's just few lines of code, leveraging LLM, which is a huge time save. You no longer have to start from scratch if you're an AI developer. or if you're even a developer, because now you can leverage patterns that exist in the world and prompt a specific code that gets generated for you for the use case that you want, and you can just tweak it. This is going to lower the barrier to enable more developers into coming into AI, which we need desperately because all of these jobs in the vertical industries are happening. The other one, for example, is how do you leverage the knowledge of the world so that you can better the experience? So for example, in robotics, I heard robotics earlier being mentioned as well. For the first time, robotics can leverage large language models to understand context of the world. So when they can see the world, they understand, what am I looking at? And the reason they understand what they're looking at, because of that knowledge being stored. Previously, you had to program every single one of these scenarios. Now with large language models, you no longer have to do that. So if I was an e-commerce website, also I can use those patterns in the world. For example, if I have a teenager coming to my website and I'm selling product, I can ask the LLM, what are the trends that are happening for teenagers today? And the reason the LLMs can answer this, because they're now all being hooked to the internet, so they understand what's happening today. So you get that knowledge of what the teenagers are interested in and what type of products, and you can automatically implement personalization at the next level that we haven't seen in the past. These are examples. So point number one, which is the opportunity, leverage the patterns of the world, either to not start from scratch or to learn insights that can improve your experience so that you take it to the next level. The second thing I want to talk about is for startups, right? Near and dear to my heart, all my parents and my family, they're all small business owners and entrepreneurs. I'm probably the odd person out because I work in corporate. One day I will get there. I'm not ready yet from a life stage perspective, but I will get there. I will follow you. But for all of you entrepreneur women and men who are creating your own company, there is an opportunity for you to create solutions based on AI. Now, these solutions are unique to the industry and the vertical because the horizontal problems are being solved, but it usually requires the integration and usage of multiple different tools. For the first time, AI can basically understand how to interact with different tools and applications. Why is that? The reason for that, we spend so much time writing APIs and applications for us so that applications can talk to each other through APIs. Now, these APIs can be leveraged by AI, and what you can do is create this end-to-end solution of a user journey, stitching a bunch of applications and bringing them together to serve a problem and making those solutions. These solutions are going to become more and more important in the industries, and they're going to be based on AI and hopefully leveraging LLMs as well in the background to enrich them. So this is the second opportunity that I have, that I'm suggesting here. The third one is, if you are not in AI, this is the best time to come in AI, because not only has AI been democratized because of foundational models and ability to start from scratch, now there are jobs outside of development for AI. I'm a product manager, I am not a developer. There are lots of product management jobs that are available in AI. There are UXR research, design jobs that are available in AI. And with the explosion of AI that's going to go everywhere, which I totally believe and see already coming, there's going to be a lot more jobs. And you can more easily come into the AI roles because of LLMs. You can all of a sudden now, if you presented with any problem in your life, trust me, work or life, I've done it, both of them. You can just go in, you can prompt and just ask that same question of the large language model. What is it going to do? It's going to give you what the pattern in the world knowledge would look like. So you don't have to spend all that time learning that domain. Now you can take that already in a much more accelerated fashion and learn something new and bring creativity, which introduces new patterns for the AI. That's the human value. That's where we can spend our time, where we create new patterns that are above and beyond what already exists in the world as in the world knowledge.
Thank you, Eman. Really, really good pointers. I love the opportunities you have highlighted, but also given that I have the opportunity and the pleasure to work with AI founders on a day in and day out, and startups are close and dear to my heart, I really want to echo what you said with respect to the opportunities that exist for entrepreneurship in AI, given the LLM wave that we see. And we see that through the companies that we work with. There are so many different verticals that are specializing with the application of LLMs to a specific problem. And that's what startups are really good at. So if you're somebody who's considering becoming a founder, this is a really good time for jumping in. So thank you, Eman, for those remarks. So as I mentioned in the introduction, the AI and Web3 spaces have a diversity, equity, and inclusion problem that reflect a long history of lack of participation from women and people of color in technology overall, unfortunately. So Terra, question for you. How do you conceive of diversity more broadly, to recognize the multitude of dimensions and especially in a global context?
I'm so glad you asked the question because it's complicated. I think it's useful to step back and remind ourselves why it matters. So Eman just talked about AI as a solutions engine. It's something you can deploy to create solutions. Well, we create solutions to questions or to problems. And so it's really important to step back and say, well, who's defining that agenda? Whose problem? Who gets to do the problem formulation and then create the solution based on that? And to use your example, Eman, sexual violence is predominantly a problem for certain types of people. And so you have to have not only the information to know that there's to start examining that problem, but you have to recognize it's a problem in the first place, because for some people it's not as big of a problem. So to me, I think that question, how do you get people, a more variety of people participating all along the chain, from all the way back in problem formulation, all the way through to solution creation and deployment? That's the really interesting question. And it's important to think about that from multiple dimensions of diversity. So we have not only the diversity that we often talk about in the Western context of gender, race, and ethnicity, LGBTQIA status, disability status, I could go on. You also have diversity, geographic diversity, and economic diversity. So, so the people that sometimes we think of as the majority in tech are not only not the majority in Western countries, they're also definitely in the minority in the world, right? And so how do we continue to bring more people into this all up and down the cycle? I don't think you can do it with one intervention. You have to have interventions at every step of the way. So you need to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in your company, which is some of what I do. You also need to focus on bringing consultation in from civil society and other groups at multiple stages during your development process as a company. And I am very excited, as Eman was talking about, as the cost of a lot of this innovation goes down, particularly at the solutions layer, of bringing in just more people to experiment, right? Lowering the barrier of entry to these applications and bringing in more people to experiment. People will have great ideas anywhere, and if we can bring down the cost, that will enable those ideas to flourish. That hasn't happened all along the chain. There's no one intervention that will fix it. If there were, tech would have figured it out a long time ago, and lots of smart people have thought about this, including Carolyn, who is unfortunately not able to be here today. And it's an intractable problem. So we have to work on it from lots of different angles at the same time.
I like that a lot, right? Because there are market forces that are going to be at play that tend to be dominant in ensuring which solutions actually gain the traction that they need. But at the same time, like what you just mentioned, Terra, there is a need for intervention because leaving it to sort of macroeconomic forces by itself clearly is not getting us to the point and to the destination that our society expects. So aside from interventions like the ones you mentioned, Terra, there's also policy. And so I want to use this to now pose a question to Stephanie and ask her, what is the role of policy in closing the gender gap in AI? And can you comment on the White House commitments and the upcoming UK commitments and your experience in this policy-based interventions that can hopefully address this diversity question in AI?
Yeah, a really, really important question. And I think policy is very critical in it, but it can be interpreted in two ways, right? You have what I'll call the capital P policy, which is policy coming from government. But I think that there's something important about what Jasmin said earlier, right? About policy within organizations as well and how critical that is. So I think starting with the sort of lowercase p, which is sort of what Jasmin was speaking about earlier, the responsibility of internal policies and practices. I do think that that's so critical and we shouldn't undermine the importance and the impact that organizations can have by just thinking about the diversity of staff, diversity of the folks who are contributing to the development of LLMs, large language models that Eman mentioned. I do think that's really significant work and something that we work very closely with our partners on. But I think it's about the diversity of the teams. But I think Eman mentioned a very important point, which is that as we see sort of large scale AI models being developed and deployed, increasingly they'll be deployed and used to inform decision making, right? And including decisions that will impact women and other sort of demographic groups. And so that I think there's something also about how we're designing and developing and deploying models that factors in the interests of women and what steps and protocols we can take and organizations can take to ensure that the impact on women, again, is fair and inclusive. So a bit of work that we've been doing at Partnership on AI, one example is on safety protocols for foundation models. And this is the idea that we really need a strong and effective evaluation and red teaming as organizations are sort of building their models. And what does it mean to have, for example, women and a diverse group of individuals engaged in that assessment process to test the models, to sort of test the outcomes and make sure that we have sort of teams that are able to spot sort of different issues potentially. I think another sort of piece of work that we have done for a long time at PAI is on documentation to facilitate transparency. So I think someone mentioned earlier the data, right? And that's so important. And I think as we're developing large models, an even greater emphasis on documentation and transparency, including the data used to train the models, is going to be really, really critical. We know many sort of forthcoming policy frameworks, and the EU's AI Act, for example, is thinking about transparency requirements. So the AI Act, if the trilogue negotiations go well, will include sort of provisions around transparency and documentation. So I think that that's very important. The last sort of other piece that I'll mention on the technical side is around demographic data. And we released a white paper in the past around demographic data use. I think it's a challenge because the FTC, for example, in the US had a call for comment, a request for comment last year around data security and the types of data and how it's collected and used to train models. A challenge I think organizations have is that traditionally, demographic data is sort of called upon or seen as important to make decisions that models make more fair, right? You want to train them on a data set that is representative to facilitate fairness in the decisions. However, in some instances, there's gaps in the sort of data sets that we have. And so there are questions about how you acquire that data in order to train models in a fair way that sort of protects privacy and security of citizens. And so I think there are still very, very important questions that we need to be answering jointly in order to ensure, again, that the model, the outputs are fair and, again, are sort of protective of women. I'll quickly transition, though, to the capital P policy, so policy from governments. I think that there is a lot that governments can do in order to sort of help the sort of gender gap. One question, or one point actually, which goes back to my introduction, was the AI Standards Hub. So when I was in government, we thought carefully specifically about AI technical standards. So AI technical standards will be the sort of tools used to certify and evaluate and give sort of trust marks, right, to AI systems at some point, which we've traditionally done for other forms of products. But those groups have traditionally not been very diverse, and the folks contributing to those discussions have not been seen to be very diverse. So leaning on the values that we articulated within the UK government, my push was that we needed to ensure that our initiatives would promote greater diversity in the standards space, particularly for AI, where there are important sort of socio-technical questions. And so the AI Standards Hub was kind of born from that idea that we needed more diversity from the UK and from our partners contributing to these standards at the international level. And so that's one example of, I think, work and projects that governments can drive. And I know the NIST work around the NIST risk management framework is really thinking about these types of initiatives too. A second example is the White House had a request for comment just a few months ago, which was thinking about the impact of AI specifically on workers. And I think that that's an important one, where it's not specifically focused on women, but women workers, right? I think that that's an important intersection where they're asking questions and they're asking citizens specifically to share their stories or their concerns related to AI deployment and women as workers and within specific sectors. And I know Eman was talking about vertical sectors earlier. I think that there might be evidence that might come from that process around specifically women in specific industries. Two last things I'll quickly say on the capital P policy point is that there is existing legislation that speaks to the rights of women. So when I was in government, one of the pieces of work I was contributing to was the UK's white paper on AI regulation. And one question we have, which kind of goes back to that horizontal versus vertical question, is we do have existing pieces of legislation, for example, in the UK, the Equalities Act, which should essentially inform how you're designing and developing any technologies. And it talks about the rights of women and sort of protecting sort of gender equities in this piece of legislation. And so I think that that's important. And there's more work I know that governments are doing to sort of think about how you take non-AI specific pieces of legislation, including things like equalities laws, and apply them to the AI space. And I'm sure that there will be more in the future. The last thing I'll say is an important piece of work that we are doing at Partnership on AI at the moment is thinking about how citizens generally have a say in the design and development of models. In March, we announced with the White House something called the Global Inclusive AI Task Force. And this is composed of a lot of our partners in industry and civil society and academia. And I think that that's really important because it's basically saying that citizens need to have a say, right? And women as citizens who will be potentially, who will sort of interact with these models should have a say in what these, how the models are developed. So one key example recently is watermarking of synthetically generated media. What does that look like? You know, how should that be designed? How do citizens have a say in how they're going to interact with those types of watermarks that will essentially tell them whether something is synthetically generated? And so what we are doing is hoping to develop a blueprint which advises AI labs on how they can get citizens engaged in the process really early, really thinking all the way back to the R&D stage through sort of pre-deployment at the deployment stage. So those are a few examples where I think, again, internally within organizations, but also thinking about the role of public policy and government, that we can really sort of make sure that our sort of equalities related to gender are very much protected.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for sharing those thoughts. And of course, then you know, it matters a ton when we think about policy. There's a lot of debate around you know, policy around AI, and you had a really good reminder in terms of some of these policies, some of the existing policies, not necessarily around AI, can actually be used. We can learn from those with respect to previous technologies. And so why not take advantage? So in line with what Eman was emphasizing it, in that there's no point in reinventing the wheel and defining patterns. Well, there may be patterns that we can look at through policy for technologies and learn from those and apply them to AI as well. So very insightful, and thank you for sharing that. So we've covered opportunities in AI. We've covered some of the interventions at the organization level. We've covered interventions at more of a societal policy level. And now I want to turn to Jasmin. And Jasmin, what do you think is the role of platforms such as the conferences that you help lead, and other community forums such as the one we're having today? What's their role in increasing participation in AI and bringing that diverse look and bringing diversity into the conversations around AI?
Absolutely. I think it provides a platform for awareness, right? If we're not talking to each other, if we're not gathered, and we're not representing, even in a forum or a community forum or a meetup, you're not gonna have a view of the community, of the entire whole diverse group. And I think that's where I play a key role at NVIDIA, is that whenever we have these sort of forums and conferences and meetups, and I think with Terra as well, when she's thinking about programs within Google, that she's thinking about the whole group, not just whoever can come. So we do have programs that we've put in place, recommendations systems that Eman was talking about, to generative AI systems, to personalization, to captions, using AIs to make sure that it is an inclusive platform, that people who are coming to the conference, whether it's virtual or in person, we're gathering all of them and we're talking together as one team versus certain groups of people going out and talking about it and inventing another program and not including other groups. So this it's very essential for these types of conversations to happen. And we're having one now that brings awareness to everybody about the gender gap and diversity gap, and how do we bring that forward, right? Conversations are important, awareness is important, and with conferences, forums, and meetups like these, that it becomes a very important. We just need to keep talking about it and find solutions.
Absolutely, and in a way, forums like this and those that you organize help address Stephanie's point with respect to really democratizing people's input into how these technologies are developed and where do the data come from and where they should be going. So in the last few minutes of our planned discussion here, I know that the audience here comprises of many entrepreneurs who are building the next generation of startups and companies in AI and Web3. I'd like to ask each and every one of you to give these entrepreneurs one advice or share a lesson learned about building efficient and diverse teams with the right culture, because every company that's getting built is going to need that recipe. So if you could take maybe a maximum of a minute each and share a learning or an advice, that would be fantastic. Maybe I'll start with Terra.
Well, my first piece of advice would be, don't start and end your thinking with large language models or even with generative AI. There are so many opportunities in other types of artificial intelligence. We're fortunate at Google DeepMind to have done quite a lot of work in fundamental science. And the barrier to entry for that with some of these technological advances is lower now. And there's so much good to be done in the world by leveraging AI to solve these really difficult problems. But also say that, at least in the studies that have been done in the US and the UK, you're more likely to attract a diverse team that way, because people from a wide diversity of backgrounds want to join places that are doing something good. in the world. That's a differentiator with young people, it's a differentiator with women, it's a differentiator with many groups of people of color. So think big, think fundamental, and diversify your team right from the start, because it only gets harder.
That's excellent. Words of gold there. I wish someone had told us that when we were starting our company. But absolutely, you're absolutely correct. No matter what venture you choose, it's going to be hard and it's going to be a lot of work. So you might as well focus on solving big problems and the problems that you truly care about. So turning to Jasmin now, what is your advice?
Similar to what Terra said, definitely start early, make sure you have a diverse group, but make sure you have diversity of thoughts, that you have people in your group that are able to contradict or to say what they feel, and you allow for that space to be there, to have transparency. Not necessarily, I may not have all the diverse groups in my team, but they're thinking about it and they're able to speak up and they're able to empathize from those groups and being able to have those voices at the table. So allowing for if you are becoming a startup, to start that culture from the beginning of transparency, of openness, to be able to share their views and to have that inclusive views being accepted.
Very important, and thank you for sharing that. It boils down to the culture ultimately, and that not only allows for that, but probably celebrates diverse thinking. Stephanie, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I completely agree. Also on both points before about diversity of thought and making sure that you create a culture that facilitates that. And also what Terra said about, again, I know there is a lot of discussion around LLMs, about large-scale AI models, but I do agree that there are many, many other approaches, I'm sure, with a lot of the entrepreneurs in the room that are that should also be thinking about a lot of these questions. But I think for me, it's definitely about in the internal policies, it's about diversity, but I think it's about thinking about the impact of what you design will have on the world. And I do think, not to repeat our mission statement at PAI, but it really is about protecting people in society. And I so strongly believe that. I also strongly believe that mission statement doesn't need to clash with the incentive around sort of innovation and doing well as a company. It's something that I so strongly tried to facilitate while I was in government, which is around, you can have good innovation and you can also have good outcomes. And I think that I want us to do away with the idea that those things will clash. Essentially. I think start early is also great. Start thinking about, as you're designing models, starting right at the R&D stage, thinking about testing, thinking about evaluation, thinking about impacts. And then the last thing, which is something I said at the beginning, which is thinking about who you're bringing to the table. And maybe that does go to the point around who you're hiring internally, but who are you consulting with? Who's within your network as an organization? I think that's very, very critical. And then the last sort of plug there is sort of internationally, I think we're in an interesting space, and it's AI in both Web3, which knows no bounds, right, or no borders. And so I really think thinking about this question about diversity, but from an international lens, and who we're bringing in to the discussion globally is also really important. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Stephanie. And last but not least, of course, we only have less than a minute, Eman, so please. I think you're on mute.
Many development organizations are very familiar with the concept of tech debt, which is when you hack a problem and you basically accumulate tech debt because you need to fix it the right way. But there's cultural debt. And this culture debt is very, very hard to fix if you do not start from the beginning and you make sure that you have the right team in place that is diverse. We need more women in AI for sure. We do not have enough. You see some of us here, there's some more, but we need a lot more than we have. If we are in the knowledge-based AI world, how can that knowledge be based on just specific kind of cultures or thought or race? It has to be diverse, and it's proven that diverse teams will result in better AI. And I talked about earlier about patterns and how to use patterns. Patterns will save you time from development cycle. Take that time and work on mitigation of these problems that could happen from AI that are resulting in misinformation and bias, and make sure that to look, for the policies that help guide us through that journey. And if you're a woman who is not in yet in AI, have the confidence to take that step. All of us here and all the men that are in AI will be those shoulders that you can lean on, and we will help you. We need you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eman, and I really appreciate the phrase culture that. I'm definitely going to use that. So thank you so much to the panel. Question is, what are the Q&A or what are the questions from the audience? And I think the organizers are going to share questions from the audience potentially.
Yes, we do have a few questions aligned with the topics that are being discussed. So how can we get governments and policymakers to trust the use of AI in medicine and at a larger policy level?
Maybe I'll shoot that over to Stephanie and see what her thoughts are on that topic.
Yes, definitely. I think if there is an area where there is a sort of, I believe, good confidence in the importance of the role that AI will play, it's in the medical space. I do think that for sure. So I think that there's a sort of good buy-in from governments and policymakers. However, the one thing I will say, and this isn't specific to AI though, if you look at other generally, actually, the regulatory benchmarks in the healthcare space, they tend to be higher than in other vertical areas. So when I was in government and sort of thinking about and working with different regulators and thinking about, what's the baseline requirements that organizations might need to meet, typically there is a sort of baseline across the board horizontally, but then in the healthcare space, you typically have rules that go above for many, many reasons, right? And for risk to citizens in particular. So all to say, I think that there is a sort of an excitement and a trust. However, if we just look historically about the sort of prescriptivity of rules in the healthcare space, they tend to be higher, and the technical standards required. So for example, AI and healthcare devices might have more requirements to be seen, of course, than in other vertical areas. So I think that would be my response to this question.
If I could add something to that, I would also say there is an unfortunate and publicly visible history of bias in aspects of the health industry, which, if that bias is accidentally imported into artificial intelligence tools of any kind, would be problematic and can set adoption back. I think we all heard about the pulse oximeter problems during COVID, of pulse oximeters not reading oxygen levels correctly on people with darker skin. So this place where bias is, it's really critical from a market perspective, but also from a moral perspective to just get it right.
Yeah, +1 to what Terra added there for sure.
I also just my 2 cents on this is I come from that space, and that's where I got my career start. And looking at the medical space actually makes me very hopeful that it's an area that regulation has been able to ensure security and safety for the general public. At the same time, the FDA has approved hundreds of AI-based solutions already, and there's already a good framework that's being built around regulating and thinking about the safety and efficacy of these types of products and technologies. Sonia, are there other questions?
Yeah, there's one more in regards to the challenges. So the challenges that we are facing in achieving ethical AGI overall, what would be the main challenges?
Okay, we haven't spent much time, talking about AGI, but curious if Eman or Terra have, or Jasmin have any thoughts. Actually, everybody, if anyone has any thoughts on this.
I'm happy to start. So what we're seeing right now in AI is some intelligence. The reason there's some intelligence, and I want to speak about the domain that I'm currently in, which is generative AI, is when you consume so much of our language, some of our language has reasoning built into it. And so because, if, for example, if this happens, then this happens, right? So this is a logic that connects a cause and effect. So in language, if you just inject language, you start to understand these really simple reasoning, right? But true intelligence of really deducting and taking this to the next level to solve an objective and make a decision is not yet there in AI. And I think we need a lot more for AI to develop for us to actually get to that stage. One of the research that I have recently looked at right now is called objective-driven AI. And the idea now is it's no longer looking at the patterns of the world and trying to say, hey, have I seen this pattern before? Can I give you a pattern, or hallucinating a pattern that may not even exist, which is, some of the downside of the current models. Objective-driven AI gives the AI a specific objective with the parameters and constraints that it needs to operate in. So the AI starts to stop looking for patterns and start to looking for path to success of that specific objective. This kind of area of research tries to get into better decision-making and better reasoning by the AI to come up with these kind of paths. Of course, it's still early in its development, but that is another step that can take us into AGI, which we are not there yet.
So I get asked this question a lot, and I'm gonna ask Eman the same. How far do you think we are from AGI?
Oh my gosh. I surely hope that at least the reasoning capabilities that I'm talking about can be solved within the next 3 to 5 years. I think there's a lot that we can do to take some of the tasks that we do on a routine basis where we need to make decisions, and then we can start to put a lot more of our intellectual power in harder problems that our society really needs to solve.
Great answer, and I want to. I see questions are also coming in through the chat. So Sonia, what's the next one?
Maybe one more.
Yeah, so there are a few that are more related to like quantum computing and whatnot, but let me take one more here. Yeah, what would be the influence from other AI applications, or in this case, quantum computing, to influence the development of AI?
So the impact of other technologies
in building AI, correct?
Affecting AI.
So I'll say a little bit about this. The revolution of AI started with really the innovation coming in hardware, right? AI did not become possible until GPUs and really high processing power existed. What we need is even more innovation from hardware in AI. And Jasmin, works in one of the best companies in the world that is working in the frontier of this. But we need hardware that is specialized and optimized for AI. And the more that hardware exists, not just in CPUs or GPUs, but I'm talking about IoT in general, that could be optimized for AI, I think the more we're going to see applications of the software coming to bring and take that journey end to end, including quantum computing, of course.
And I will add from an ethical perspective that
Please.
As we start bringing AI, the intersection of artificial intelligence and some of these other technologies is going to multiply the ethical questions. Just as adding multiple modalities onto large language models multiplies the questions. So then you're talking video, you're talking images, you're talking voice and sound replication. Start thinking about the intersections of artificial intelligence and biology. And there's going to be tremendous potential, and it's also going to multiply the ethical questions that we need to all think about.
Definitely. Stephanie, it seems like you have your hand up, and we're at time, but please finish your thought.
Yeah, I completely agree with that last point. From the potential side, I mean, people talk about quantum sensors and their potential role in sort of facilitating pretty fast developments for autonomous vehicles, for example, right? But in terms of risks, there's also concerns that quantum computers could break the forms of cryptography that we think are pretty secure at the moment. And then you might need some form of quantum cryptography to replace that. So I think we don't fully understand what the full opportunities and risks are, particularly as the sort of quantum space is very much still growing and developing. But I agree that a lot of opportunity, but as Terra said, I think if anything, as you start stacking technologies, many questions and ethical questions will only continue to grow potentially.
Excellent. Well, I know we are at time, and I want to thank each and every one of our panelists for taking the time to participate. It's been a pleasure being part of this discussion with you all, and looking forward to having more of these types of conversations that really put the spotlight on this very important topic. So with that, I will turn it back to Thomas for the rest of the program. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. A big thank you to all of you. Don't run away.
Oh.
Don't run away.
All right, no running
just
away.
give me 1 minute. So first of all, I want to send best wishes and speedy recovery to Carolyn, who hopefully has listened to this presentation from home. So, hopefully you feel better very soon. I want to personally thank you. I'm actually very honored to have you here. I didn't know that you actually came all the way down, because for me, I spent 10 years way back when in the graphic industry. And what NVIDIA has done, what DeepMind has done, starting this way back when, you pretty much started this whole thing with what you did 10, 15 years ago. So thank you very much. It's my honor for you to be here and standing next to you. I want to say thank you to Hedi, the moderator, who had pretty much 10 hours or 12 hours to prepare. But not only that, because as I mentioned earlier in the beginning, this actually independent out of this conference, Hedi and I have teamed up early this year, and this is the 4th remarkable woman in AI session that we have pulled off together. And I have to say, as a man, every single time I always enjoy listening to the conversation of these sessions. The other ones are all online. You can check them under the Transatlantic AI Exchange. They're actually very worth listening to. With that, I would like to thank you, Eman, Terra, I already mentioned, Stephanie and Jasmin. This was a pleasure. It was an honor. And I hope that we will not have this, the last one. There will be other remarkable women in AI, and you have an open invitation to come back anytime. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.